And here we are, back for another End Times update, December 29. And what an interesting night we had with a few topics going. It's good to be with many of you who I know have been asking right here on vacation, will we have this? And yes, here we are. So it's, again, good to be with you. And I thought... we're going to get that turned on. So apologies. We're going to start in here shortly. Last week, some of you did say you missed it. And I want to give just one thought here. We spent last week there talking about the amazing prophecies of the Holy Bible. And that is what we're using as our source of prophecy. For the big reason, it has great credibility. And for all the people who are skeptics, agnostics, even atheists, I respect you in your positions, your thoughts. But I also would like to appeal to you to approach the Holy Scriptures with a certain open mind and objectivity, because it's quite amazing. Just this Christmas season and the prophecies in the Old Testament that were in place hundreds of years before the Christ child was born, and how he was the fulfillment of these prophecies, literally hundreds. It's just quite amazing. And so last week what I did, I even showed some of the amazingness of that, because it kind of sets a good tone for our update as we each week look at current events and what the Bible says about the end times. But just talking about Christ, let me go to what we did last week. If you were to take just 103 prophecies fulfilled in one person, as they were with the Old Testament prophecies being fulfilled in Christ, you see that the odds of that happening are just astronomical. In fact, if you start looking at it with zeros, it's 1 in 10 to the 17th power, and that's what that looks like. As you think about the amazing aspect of the prophecies being fulfilled. And somebody said, well, that doesn't mean much, all those zeros. Well, there's a fellow named Peter Stoner who said, if you were to take the state of Texas, cover it with silver dollars 2 feet deep, and mark one silver dollar and fly over it with an airplane and drop it in there, and then if you were able to bring in heavy earth moving equipment and mix up all those silver dollars, and then take somebody and fly them over the state and say, you can walk, we'll give you much food and whatever you want. You just walk and walk until you want to take a stab at guessing if you could reach down and pull up the silver dollar with the marking on it. That is the odds of finding or having one person fulfill all these prophecies. And it's just, when you think of it in that respect, you find yourself just totally in awe, realizing that there is a miracle of Christmas. We usually think of it in terms of the love of God, that he would send his son and give of himself, come in the form of an earthly flesh to pay the price for sin. That's certainly a miracle all of its own, but just fulfilling prophecy is another amazing miracle. And that kind of sets the tone as we start looking ahead here. When we talk about the prophecies we're looking at, I'm not going to go over the entire list. We're up to 20, and I'm even going to, last week I said I'm going to propose a 21st prophecy here coming from the book of Peter, 2 Peter. But we use as the main part of the prophecies looking forward, we look at what Jesus did when he answered the disciples' question about the end times, after having been at the temple and him telling the disciples the time would come when not one stone would be left on top of another, which we have as prophecy 1 here on this list. But if you were to go down the list, many would claim to be the Messiah. You'd hear of wars and rumors of wars, but the end would not yet, would still be to come. There'd be conflict between people groups and countries. There'd be famines, earthquakes, pestilence. All these would be the beginning of birth pains. Then there'd be Christ's followers would be persecuted, killed, hated by all people groups. We're getting now to some of the talk too that's even big scale, worldwide. Many of Christ's followers would stop believing and turn on each other. Many false prophets would appear and deceive many. The love of many would grow cold as wickedness increased. The gospel would be preached to all people groups, which is kind of a positive right there in the middle of all these negatives. And then the end would come, Jesus said. The abomination, he's quoting from Daniel when he talks, the abomination, the lawless one would stand in the holy place. There would be great distress in Jerusalem and Judea. There'd be false Christs and prophets that even perform great signs and miracles to deceive the elect. There'd be a global financial system where a mark would be required to buy or sell. That's not from Jesus, that's from the book of Revelation, but very clear there, because that's kind of the hinge pin of the book of Revelation from how that becomes a key factor in who experiences this tremendous wrath of God, talked about in Revelations 15 and 16. Then there'd be as terrifying catastrophic events in the heavens. On earth, there'd be roaring, tossed into the sea that would cause alarm, even death by fear, from fear. Then Jesus says, at that time, the Son of Man will come in the clouds in great power and glory. And then going on, Paul told the Thessalonian church that at that time, the followers of Christ would meet Christ in the air, but that is, the dead would rise first. And that takes us here to what I want to say. I think I'm going to propose a fourth prophecy from 2 Peter chapter 3, where in verse 3, he says, above all, you must understand that in the last days scoffers will come, scoffing and following their own evil desires. They will say, where is this coming he promised? Ever since our ancestors died, everything goes on as it has been since the beginning of creation. But they deliberately forget that long ago, by God's word, the heavens came into being and the earth was formed out of water and by water. And goes on to talk from that. Oh, I better read. For these waters also the world of that time was deluged and destroyed by the same word. The present heavens and earth are reserved for fire, being kept for the day of judgment and destruction, the ungodly. So here you have very, very much a prophecy that Peter talks of. In the last days, there will be scoffers. And now there's probably been scoffers for much time, but I can tell you that some of the feedback I get, even with this End Times update, as you might expect, I hide a lot of comments, let me tell you, that are very, people very much strong in their position and very much bitter about spiritual things. I want to ask so many who see this program or see this End Times update, I'd like to ask them sometimes, what if they're wrong? And they probably would have a good answer for that. But I'm not sure. I'd like to also ask, why is it such a hot topic? Why do you suppose that is? Why is this such a sensitive topic to so many people? Now, there are many who are seeking and searching, and that's who this program is intended for. That's who this update is intended for, who have looked at scriptures. They're looking at scriptures. They're wanting to understand what the prophecies are. And this is all about connecting dots between the prophecies and the current events that are taking place that fulfill those prophecies. So what we've done is, as you saw when going through those prophecies, we've numbered them. And so when we look at the first one that we'll talk about this time, well, let me back up. I had gone through and I had realized that for those prophecies to ever take place, and in answer to the question, people have challenged me nicely, actually, especially some intellectuals who are not believers, and they have asked me, what makes you really think this is the true end of the age? And I can tell you that there are so many things happening that are the first time in human history that fit what Jesus said, that fit this end of the age. So here we are. I pointed out that there's global physical distress that has to happen. These are things that would have to happen for Jesus' prophecies and the scriptures to be fulfilled. Physical distress, global persecution and prejudice, global apostasy and wickedness, global evangelism, global translation, global communications, global audiovisual, global currency, financial system, global ID system, and global government. So here you have a lot of things that would have to take place. Now, having said all that, let's go ahead and jump in with Prophecy 3, there'll be wars and rumors of wars. This is going to be just kind of an update, at least for a few slides. There are some things happening. Actually, there is a new one tonight you're going to be interested in. But this first one, the war in some ways between Russia and Ukraine, and it almost feels like now it is Russia and the United States. But here we have both sides talking about how that this risk is intensifying. And here's one where high risk of clash between Russia and U.S., says ambassador with diplomatic relations, is in ice age. It's going back. It's freezing up. It's not proving to be a good thing at all. We have Moscow delivering Ukraine with a war ultimatum about accepting their terms. They want to have Ukraine give up the territories that Russia has conquered. They want to have all of this very much on certain terms, and they're saying accept those terms, or there will be some serious ramifications, and that it will be settled with their army, which they also keep alluding to and referring to the use of nuclear power. So who knows where that will end up? There is an interesting article that I find where Zelensky is already talking about rebuilding the Ukraine. I'm not sure if that means that there are some things being talked that we're not aware of. Look for news articles along those lines. If any of you have any, I'd be interested to have you send them to me. And by the way, I'm not real interested just in thoughts or speculation. I'd like to, if you hear of anything where somebody is being quoted, please feel free to send that to me. That if it fits, I can share. This one is really quite interesting, because this is Zelensky from Ukraine saying that they're going to rebuild with investments from BlackRock. Now, for those of you who are like, who is BlackRock? We're going to talk more about BlackRock in a bit, but that is the probably one of the top investment companies that holds trillions of dollars of investors. Probably some of your money, my money, for anyone who has anything that's in investments, especially in the stock market. So this is a very interesting thing, that it's not just that BlackRock has a lot of the humankind's money that it works with. It also is a very key player in the World Economic Forum. Now, for those of you on the mailing list, I sent out a link tonight. I didn't go back and check. I want to make sure that does pull up. I sent out a link to the World Economic Forum website. They're going to be meeting again here soon, January 16th through 20, over in Davos, Switzerland. And for those of you who are interested, the topics they're talking about, these are these are hot topics. These are very much life-affecting. And for people who want to know what's the big deal about the World Economic Forum, well, they happen to have some of the world's wealthiest and most powerful people that are right there that meet every year. In fact, for some of them, twice a year. They have a winter meeting in Switzerland. They have a summer or mid-year meeting in China. And they have tremendous influence on the earth. In fact, they are bringing about some very interesting changes, while you and I and others many of us here in America, we are going about our jobs and really not wanting to be interrupted too much as a norm with any thoughts that are being talked. But I almost started this program tonight with a question, and that is, if you knew somebody was about to run into something down the road, would you want to have anybody warn them, or would you warn them? Would you want to know if it was you? And I didn't start with that. I might still fine-tune that thought just a little bit, because what this End Times Update is all about is helping people realize what is ahead. And many of you were very surprised at one link I shared. If you do want to receive any of these links or be on the mailing list, you are certainly welcome to send me a request at davidcarylifecoach@gmail.com. Email me. In fact, it's here at the bottom of a lot of these slides. And if you want to know where some of these news sources are coming from, Most of you are familiar with The Hill, but there are many here from Newsweek to you name it. There are just many sources here. But I'm glad to tell you if it doesn't show up plain or if you miss it. But here you have this very critical bit of information, because you have BlackRock, which is a part of the World Economic Forum in a key way. Larry Fink, CEO, and who's very closely involved. You have them, I'm not saying it's good or bad at this moment, I'm just saying you have them involved at the rebuilding of a country. And they're using investment dollars from people and corporations from America. And this ties in with, again, this realization that much of what is happening in our world is very much at the corporate level. I used to think it was at the governmental level that all these things would take place. They're involved, for sure. But it's not the masses of the people in the population. It's not you and me that are going to determine whether something happens or doesn't happen. I hope you understand that. I used to think for a long time they could never have some things happen in America. It would never happen. People wouldn't let it happen. You need to forget that. It's not going to be the people, as in a democratic vote. So if you don't understand that, and you don't see that by now, I need to, as lovingly and carefully and kindly as I can say, you're going to need to wake up to that realization. This says that, and it fits in with the wars in kind of an interesting way. I think you can see that too for yourself. Let's go on to the next thing that I think is rather interesting. Here is the king of Jordan threatening conflict if Israel crosses Jerusalem red lines. Not Jerusalem's red lines, but if King Jordan says Israel crosses the red lines having to do with Jerusalem. See, back when, was it 67 war, Israel gave Jordan the custodial management of the Temple Mount area. And so for many years now, it's been controlled, so to speak, by Jordanian influence and the Palestinian Authority and all that goes with all of it. There's a lot going on that people don't realize. But in recent years and in recent times, there's been a growing interest with the Jewish people of having access to the Temple Mount, into the area where the Holy of Holies is, so that they could pray on what they consider their holy ground. And there's more and more talk and push, and the Temple Mount Institute, which we've talked about here on the update, is that there's a desire, a growing desire, to the Jewish people more and more are wanting to have access to that Temple Mount. What's also of interest with this particular update is that you have the war, the Psalms 83 war that Bill Salas, quite a scholar on end times, talks about. And he talks about the Psalms 83 war as being the one where it's the neighboring countries right around Israel that will have some confrontation, and Israel will win out, as prophesied there, Psalms 83. There's another war that we hear about that he also talks about, which is the Ezekiel 38 war, and that's more the bigger countries further out and the ones to the north, Russia. And I would assume all those that come, Iran, Syria, Lebanon, those that are up to the north, that some of those are bordering, but that they're all tied in, having allies. Shift with Turkey that's taking place. It's very interesting. But China and Russia very much now allies. So you have that war shaping up as described in Ezekiel 38. But this one with Jordan appears to be something that could very well be, if you read Psalms 83. Of course, a lot of the old names of the countries are used in the Bible translations. Let's go on here. We have to talk about this just a minute. I ran across this article today, or recently, about the earthquake swarm in Hawaii caused by magma movement through pancake-like chambers. You might be interested to know, and I didn't realize this, but when these earthquakes now are taking place, there are literally thousands of earthquakes. One of the big earthquakes that took place in Southern California back 2015-16, from that until 2020 or 2021, there were 22,000 recorded earthquakes. I didn't even know that. In fact, I'm really thinking that I will go on here because I want to read one article that was right at the end of one of the articles I read, and I really wished I'd had that up because I'd like to have shown that. It said, and it's this very article, an earthquake swarm consisting of thousands of seismic shocks lasted for years in Southern California. Between 2016 and 2019, there were approximately 22,000 tremblers occurring, which became a strange event for scientists, according to the National Geographic. The swarm of earthquakes that started in early 2016 silently shook the earth beneath Southern California. By spring of 2018, thousands of small earthquakes struck each month, enough to sway lamps and affect residents in nearby towns. And then the last thing I wanted to read here. Aside the U.S., other parts of the world have also experienced earthquake swarms in the past, including India, the Philippines, Czech Republic, Germany, France, El Salvador, Peru, and so on. So here we have this amazing thing happening that I don't know if many of us knew. They talk about since recording the earthquakes, nothing significant has happened. And yet you have right here where they're saying that this is strange even to scientists, according to the National Geographic, that these things are happening now at such high volume, high scale, and these swarms. That's a new phrase, earthquake swarm. It's all the smaller earthquakes that take place around a big one or a volcano. So I found that very fascinating. That fits when we talk about SEISMOS, wave damage. Remember, wave damage is not just earthquakes as in earth movement, but it's also water waves, air waves. I've, by the way, sent out a lot of articles here on this one this week because there were so many. There's a Arctic river coming through, and California may have some relief of their drought because there's a lot of rain and snow that's supposed to come through in the next short while, and even causing some floods. But this is very interesting to me that all of this, a lot of these type of things that are unusual are taking place. Not necessarily unusual in the big picture, because there have been storms of big proportion through the years. We know that. But when you start talking about things unusual to scientists and 22,000 small quakes that they're calling earthquake swarms, that seems to me to present another whole aspect to what we talk about. There is one more. We always keep an eye on Yellowstone here in America, especially because they're saying it's maybe one of the biggest volcanoes that's rumbling a little in our country. That's going to do tremendous damage when it blows, and it is overdue, and it will be of serious significance. So Newsweek was reporting on that. For time's sake, I want to go on. Here's where I find something very similar, very, very interesting and very significant. And that is the prophecy, there will be pestilence. That is not just disease, it's the oppression that goes with the world that is feeling the repercussions of disease. And here is one talking about that the the World Economic Forum shifts into high gear and preparing for the next pandemic. Well, what are they referring to? Here is an interesting article. China's biggest outbreak hits after country reaches 92% COVID vaccination rate. 1 billion people now have been vaccinated in China, and they have, this article points out, 248 million infections going right now. 248 million. This is huge. Very huge. Well, what is also of great significance and of great interest, I'm not sure you're going to believe some of this. I'm still trying to get my thoughts wrapped around this, is not only are they having the biggest outbreak, this is the biggest outbreak. I want to make sure you understood what I said. And this is not somebody conspiring something here. These are facts. You can find them online. Plenty of news sources. In fact, anything I question, I start looking for other sources to corroborate and to make sure that it's not just somebody making something up somewhere. But these are facts that are easily checked out online. Some places easier than others, and it's taken me a while to get some of the sources. But these are, many of them, if not, I mean, all trustworthy, or I wouldn't use them. There are some that are not as trustworthy that I squint my eyes on things they say. Excuse me. But here we have them talking about, this is the biggest outbreak since COVID became known in 2020. This in China is the most they've had with infections. And are you hearing much about it? I didn't think so. This next point is, I think, rather significant, because there's a virologist, a medical expert at Reed Hospital, Army Hospital, and I believe that's in Maryland. And he says it's extremely irresponsible. Experts warn China's border reopening amid COVID surge may trigger global pandemic resurgence. Global pandemic resurgence. Is that of interest to you? So here we have China opening up its borders for travel in and out, and they are having the greatest. See, they were frozen down. They were locked up for months and years off and on. And it was still, the problem was just becoming more and more and more critical. But now they are allowing people to come and go from the country. And there are many excited folks in China who are thrilled to think that they will be able now to leave the country. Now, I'm just telling you, when you talk about there will be pestilence, I'm finding, are you not finding that some of the things that are the craziest things, you can't really explain why some things are happening like they are. But when you see what is taking place from a scriptural or prophetic standpoint, suddenly some of it does make sense. And here, when you hear this, you're going, okay, doesn't make sense, but it sure fits what Jesus said would happen. That's the only rhyme or reason I can make of a lot of things that are happening. I was going to tell you, for some of you are interested in the World Economic Forum, I want to tell you that it is the World Economic Forum and the United Nations that are working very closely together. We don't hear a lot in the United States, so we're not really seeing what's coming down the pike. We're not really talking about it. In fact, I can honestly tell you right now, probably more people, that is going to be an understatement. I started to say more people don't want to talk about it than do. There are more people who purposefully don't want to talk about it than those who are even halfway open to it. I mean, there's a strong feeling that in America, we don't want our comfort zones messed with. We don't want to have anybody talking about something that's going to change our American lifestyle and American dream. And I understand that. I went through that. I didn't want to either. But for people who would say, and I still don't say why we need to talk about it, you probably don't. I think you are going to be less prepared and suffer more emotionally and psychologically when things are being forced on you. You're probably going to go along with more unanswered questions. I think that's a given. I sure don't know it all. If I come across that way, I apologize. I don't fully understand everything yet. But I can tell you, I understand enough that the days are gone where I'm scratching my head about most things I see happening. It fits very easily and very well into what Jesus said would happen. So I'm not surprised. And it also helps me psychologically and spiritually that I'm able to embrace what is going on as not just what Jesus said would, but as exciting last days that will lead up to his return, his second coming. But here is the theme that I've put here, and you probably can't read, some of you can't read it unless you're with a bigger TV screen. I do want to say again, if you are interested in, just go to the World Economic Forum, WEF, I believe it's WEF.com. In fact, I'm going to check something real quickly here if it won't mess things up. I think I can do that and come back, I hope, but it's WEFORUM.org. So World Economic Forum, it's WEFORUM.org/agenda. You can find there the you can find there the agenda, the themes that they're going to be talking over starting January 16th. And I'll just read them briefly for those that don't want to go there. Theme 1, Ukraine shines a light on importance of global cooperation. Theme 2, 3 interconnected crises: climate, food, and energy. Theme 3, don't use the R, recession word, but it might be coming anyway. Theme 4, preparing for the next pandemic requires ending health disparities. Theme 5, gender inequality and jobs of tomorrow. Theme 6, our future is digital. Now, you're going, what's the big deal? So what? Those are the themes, are good talking points. They're of high interest. Every one of those is going to affect you and me in our lifestyle. It's going to affect where our money goes, where we have to spend money, how our money is going to be stored, every one of those. And this is not like down the road 40 years. You're going, how do you know? Because too much is happening right now. Some of you remember last week, there were several things being said. And by the way, for those who are thinking, boy, you're getting kind of excited about this. I am. I don't like thinking of a knee-jerk reaction to any of this, but I have to tell you, when you start studying this, when you start seeing what, in this case, WEFORUM.org, when they say what they say, this is not people talking about them. When they say what they're going to do and what they're going to cover, and that they've got the most brilliant minds and the most powerful people and the most money in the world in their organization, and they are going to make it happen, they're not talking down the road long term. They are talking now. They are talking in these months and years. One of their companies they feel is the epitome of a good example of what they think should be is China. And there's no doubt in my mind that what they're seeing and what China's intent to be the superpower of the world here soon, they're on board. They're all working with that in mind. And for the people who don't see it and don't realize that we're going to have some very different days in our near future. It may not be in 2023, but it will be, I think, in my lifetime. And I mean, I fully expect it. And unless you're quite elderly or quite sick, I'm going to be surprised if it's not in yours. It's just one of those things, and it's going to affect every aspect of the way we live life, very much so. And the more you study it, the more you see. But here they are. They're going to be making decisions. And one of the things that I highlighted here is preparing for the next pandemic requires ending health disparities. Somebody might go, what in the world is ending health disparities? Well, we've talked before about something you can find online very easily, and that is the amazing patent that Bill Gates put into effect in 2020. And it took me the longest time to figure out what in the world is that patent talking about. But it's very obvious, and now I've heard Bill Gates himself, and you can easily pull him up all over the place on YouTube. He's talking about this whole thing where the world is better and protected because it's not just the rich and the well-to-do who are going to have access to good medical coverage, but they're going to have it spread the whole world. And I think on face value, that really sounds good. However, when they start implementing a system to track who cooperates and who doesn't agree with what's supposed to happen, now you've got a whole nother life to be lived. And you may want to go to this website to see for yourself, not what anybody says about them, but what they say, what they're hoping to do and accomplish, and the direction they're going. So anyhow, that is there for your consideration tonight. I think it's critical. A couple more things here before we go. Jesus said there will be false prophets. Now, I am really interested in the Nostradamus prophecies. Some people put way more stock in Nostradamus than the Holy Bible. And he was wrong on a few. The Bible's not been wrong on any, interestingly. But Nostradamus, he actually has some predictions that he predicted from way back. And he said in 2023 that we would be seeing the Antichrist. Now, I don't know how wrong it is. He missed it a little bit on 2022. He talked about, this article points out that he felt that cannibalism would take place, that there'd be such hunger that there'd be people feeding on people. So he kind of missed that one, but he certainly has some other things that he was, and maybe that's what false prophets are all about. They get some things right, and then people start believing in them, and then they don't know what to believe when they start getting things wrong. But anyhow, I thought you might find this one of interest as far as false prophets. I'd say Nostradamus is probably one of the most popular false prophets that exist out there. Call him what you will. It just fits, doesn't it? I mean, I don't need to argue that. The other thing I do want to mention, the gospel be preached to all people groups. This I have to keep talking about because it is happening. For people who say, so what's different about this generation and all the others? Never in the history, well, let's put this back. Never in any generation since Jesus made this comment about the gospel being preached in all nations has there been the chance that it would be preached in all nations. There was no way to orchestrate, no way to make sure all the barriers were crossed. In fact, in the book of Acts, when the disciples came out and started even talking about the gospel in their native tongue, these people were being accused of being drunks, because I mean, even that was revolutionary. That was major. But now here we have in 2022 this Bible that's being printed by Tyndale House Publishers, and inside the front cover they're talking about working with Wycliffe Bible translators. And where Wycliffe used to have a goal of having the Bible in every language, the gospel being preached in every language by 2150, they dropped it back with technology, saying, okay, we might make it by 2033. They've been doing this for decades, working on this. And now they have Vision 2025, where they believe that they will a Bible translation program in every language group that needs it by the year 2025. I mean, this is current day stuff. And what's significant about that? Jesus said, when this happens, the end will come, in his sequence of things he talked about. So we have to take this serious, and we have to realize that if there were no other things happening, no geopolitical things lining up with all the wars and rumors of wars, and if there was no great increase with earthquakes, and if there was no worldwide pandemic or pestilence taking place, and if you go down that list, if there was no secularization or falling away from faith, if none of that was happening that Jesus said would happen, and this was the only thing you understood him to say, you'd have to be almost going, wow, this is kind of amazing. We're there. This is the time in human history. Very different from any other time. Very different. Just having all these things happening at the same time. So it's on that I wrap up this week. I hope you all do well here with the new year. Happy New Year to you. And we will continue to look at all of these events, connecting the dots, events with the prophecies. And if any of you still think that we're making a stretch or that the imagination's working overtime, I'm welcome to hear it. I want to make sure we keep this thing as real as possible, but I also hope you'll stay as open and that you'll keep preparing and getting ready for what is happening, but also for those of you who care about family and others, that this will be taught. You'll drop a line here and there. After all, the deception is overwhelming. That's part of what Jesus said would happen. The deception and the wickedness and all that goes with this age that we're seeing, does cause harm. It's good that we can seek and find, and that we can seek for truth, knowing the truth will set us free. God bless you. We will look forward to meeting again next week.